Hello and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT patch rundown video. Set 5 Reckoning is finally here and it comes with patch 11.9. We're saying goodbye to the Set 4 mechanics and saying hello to all the new systems, items, synergies, and champions they've added with Set 5. There's a lot of new additions to the game, so we highly recommend checking out the patch notes and looking up everything they've added. With all that said, we have a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and dive on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. The first addition to talk about with Set 5 is the introduction of the new game mode, Hyper Roll. Hyper Roll, which is the first new game mode for TFT that they are referring to as a lab, is a mode with a much faster gameplay than regular TFT. Everyone begins with 20 health, with each loss costing 2 health, which scales up the longer the game goes on. Along with that, you no longer need to spend gold to level up. It will happen automatically at the start of each stage. Stages will go much quicker as well, so leveling will happen fairly often early on. And lastly, there's no extra gold earned from interest and no streak gold. This means you want to spend your gold often, as sitting on it doesn't really provide any additional benefits. Alongside these new mechanics, there's plenty of others, so be sure to check out Hyper Roll when you've got the itch to play TFT but don't want to commit to a full regular game. Let's shift back over to the normal game mode with the new Set 5 Reckoning mechanics. Whether you liked it or not, the Chosen system is out and new Shadow Item system is in for Set 5. Other mechanics that won't be appearing in Set 5, at least for now, are the Lucky Lantern and Ornn artifacts, both of which were introduced in Set 4.5. First, let's briefly talk about the new Shadow Items. Every component now has a second form, which has a chance to appear in every carousel after the first, as well as the armory. We'll talk about the armory soon, but keep in mind that shadow components aren't that easy to get since they don't drop from PvE rounds, so be decisive and you're able to pick one up. As for what shadow components do, you only need one of either component to combine into what are known as shadow items. For example, if you have a shadow tier and a regular sword, they will turn into a spectral tier of Shojin. It doesn't matter if the tier or the sword is a shadow component, as long as one or both of them are, you'll gain the new shadow item when combined. In general, shadow items are more powerful than regular ones, though most of them come with a downside along with benefits. Using Spectral Spear of Shojin as an example, the item holder restores more mana per attack than the normal Shojin, but does 20% less damage. Not every shadow item has harsh downsides, but all of them will function differently than the normal item, whether it's additional effects or increased stats. We won't be listing every shadow item today, so we recommend checking out the patch notes or other online resources to learn all the new items being added. Alright, we mentioned it briefly, but the other main mechanic being added is the armory. The armory is a pop-up shop that will appear on the second round of stages 2, 3, and 4. The shop will provide you the option to select from 2 to 4 components, which often have a shadow component available. These components are all free, though you can take only one per armory. As shadow components are only available here and on the carousel, it's recommended that you take a shadow component from the armory, since you may not be able to find one later. But of course, the choice is yours, so if you really needed that regular rod and it shows up on the armory, great. The new mechanic is exactly what the game needed, and it was well received throughout testing on the PvE. That's it for Set 5 mechanics. Let's now move on to the system changes. First are a few tweaks to the unit movement. The old way units move is when their target moved out of their attack range, they'd move 1 hex to attempt to get back into range. Then it would reevaluate if its target was still within range, or if they aren't. This is why certain backline champions would run forward after attacking, which caused a lot of frustration if it happened to your carry. The new system makes it so the unit will evaluate before moving 1 hex whether moving would put it back into range or not. If not, the unit will instead reevaluate its target, meaning it's less likely to go chasing after champion. This is a great change, but unit pathing in TFT is a never-ending battle for efficiency, so even the new system is likely not to be perfect. Just keep in mind they're always working to improve the game. The other movement change for Set 5 is that assassins will now consistently jump first before other champions move at the start of combat. Basically, this means you can position to protect your main carry from assassins with melee units in front of your ranged champion. Before, what would happen is oftentimes a melee unit would move and create a space for the enemy assassin to jump. Now that shouldn't happen, or if it does, it will be less frequent. Basically, you now have a way to counter position against assassins, which is great. Next up, they've made changes to mana generation. Previously in TFT, when a champion was given a lot of tanky items, they'd in turn gain a lot of mana when taking damage. Think about Sejuani from set 4, where a few defensive items on her would allow her to survive a ton of damage and thus cast multiple times. Before, the way they balanced this was, well, increasing the champion's mana pool. Now they've tweaked it so that the old system, which was 6% of damage taken pre-mitigation was turned into mana, is now 1% pre-mitigation and 7% post-mitigation. Basically, stacking defensive items on a frontliner is still going to be useful, but it won't cause them to generate an insane amount of mana like it previously did. We recommend ignoring the specific math and instead playing around with it in-game, as that's the best way to get a feel for changes like this. The next system change is an update to ability and item conventions. What this means is how things are worded or how they appear in-game. For example, attack range on champions is now calculated in hexes instead of the weird number system they used before. Spell power is renamed to ability power, which makes it more consistent as most players referred to it as ability power already. And basic attacks are now just attacks. Other changes include all physical attacks from abilities or attacks can now critically strike and be dodged. Active abilities will now all be blocked by Trap Claw, and lastly, they did an update on item icons, so if things look different in the game, that's why. Overall, these changes bring a lot of consistency to the game, which makes it a lot easier for new players to learn. They've also added a shop glow to champion cards when you own a copy of that champion. The glow is faint but noticeable, basically making it easier to know whether you have a champion already or not. This is useful for rolling down, though veteran players may get annoyed at the slight distraction the glow causes. Overall, it's a great addition, but did reroll players really need a buff? As with every new set comes tweaks to the shop, but this time shop odds needed to be adjusted as they were originally changed in set 4 due to the chosen mechanic. At level 7, the odds from 1 cost to 5 costs are going from 22, 35, 30, 12, 1% to 19, 35, 30, 15, 1%. At level 8, the odds are now 15, 20, 35, 25, 5% from 15, 25, 35, 20, 5%. To sum up these changes, they've overall increased the odds of finding a 4-cost champion at level 7 and 8. This was a necessary change as they originally lowered the odds in set 4 because of the chosen mechanic, and with that gone, it felt like 4 costs were a bit too hard to hit. These are good adjustments, though they still may need to be tweaked in future patches. Next up is a bunch of adjustments to round timers. Essentially, there's quite a bit of downtime in TFT that isn't all that necessary. Cutting a few seconds here and there does add up, so reducing the timer where they can should help. It's also necessary as the new armory system added a bit of time to the round it appears on. For the full list of changes, check out the patch notes, but the quick overview is less pick time on carousel rounds, PvE rounds are slightly faster, and there's less planning time during stage 1-2 and 1-3. And the last system change to talk about is to Tiebreakers. Tiebreakers have gone through several iterations, with the newest change making it so the player who won a round more recently will finish ahead of the other, assuming both players were eliminated on the same round with the same health prior to elimination. This should help Tiebreakers feel more fair and, more importantly, consistent. With system changes covered, let's move on to changes to components. Overall, they've reduced the base stats for components and the items they turn into. The reason is to lower the power of champions relative to the items they have, meaning items won't be as essential as in previous sets. Of course, they are still very important, but lowering the base stats means they provide less of a sudden boost to your board, so upgrading your board ends up being more important overall. Like with other changes, there's a lot of tweaks here, so we recommend checking out the patch notes for the specifics. Next up for items are a lot of changes to the classic items. There's of course the reduction of base stats that we just talked about, but there's a couple of reworked items and other items had their effects tweaked. And with so many changes, we'll limit our coverage to the items that were the most adjusted. First up, there's new unique items, meaning their effect won't stack with themselves. Those items are Trap Claw, Sunfire Cape, Guardian Angel, and Frozen Heart. Bloodthirster gained a new effect where the first time the item faller falls below 40% health, they gain a shield equal to 30% of their maximum health for 5 seconds. The item still provides lifesteal, but the new shield makes it an overall much better item. Dragon's Claw has been reworked and now grants 200 bonus magic resist. It's an interesting rework as 200 magic resist is a lot, but also means the item holder can be affected by things that reduce their magic resist, which lowers how useful Dragon's Claw is. Frozen Heart, along with being unique, went from 50% attack speed slow to 30%, but the radius went up to 2 from 1. It's a bit weaker, but also opened the door for the shadow variation to be stronger. Luden's Echo is now Archangel Staff. The new effect is that each time the wearer casts their spell, they gain bonus ability power equal to 30% of their maximum mana. This item is much better than Luden's and finally gives players a reason to use a Tear and a Rod together. Rapid Fire Cannon's bonus attack range went from plus 200% to only 1 additional hex. But since the increased attack range was so heavily reduced, they've compensated it with 40% increased attack speed. This is a good change, but they may need to adjust it again in the future. Redemption received a rework as the item holder now heals allies within 1 hex for 25% of their missing health every 5 seconds. In addition to that, allies affected by it take 40% redacted damage from AoE. All around good changes to Redemption, though it has gone through like 3 or 4 reworks at this point. Spear of Shojin has sadly become an on-hit item, meaning it no longer works with Runaan's Hurricane. A sad day for Shojin indeed. Zephyr received a huge change as it now ignores crowd control immunity. This is a massive change that increases the value of Zephyr by a lot. And lastly, Zizirot received several changes. First, the taunt now happens immediately and is an instant effect, so units won't chase the item holder and end up in weird positions. Instead, they'll retarget once the Zizirot unit is out of range. Next, they've changed it so that the construct scales based on the current stage rather than the star level of the item holder. This is a good change because now you have a bit more options throughout the game on what champion you give Zizirot to. Lastly, summon units will no longer summon a construct. This means for set 5, the Abomination won't be able to run into your backline with triple Zizirot anymore. But keep in mind this is a temporary change as they're still working on ways to balance the Abomination and Zizirot, so for now, enjoy Zizirot not working with the monstrosity. And that's it for changes introduced in set 5 Reckoning, but keep in mind there's a lot more to set 5, including new champions and synergies. Plus, there's shadow items and a whole new set of spatula recipes to learn. We highly recommend checking out not only the patch notes, but looking at other online resources to help you with the new set. Let us know in the comment section below which change you like the most in set 5 Reckoning. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.